Geico presents Our Town, Season 4, a 30-minute podcast produced by Best Bark Communications, a small but fierce client-centered marketing company powered by decades of experience and well-established business networks. Geico, 15 minutes can save you 15% or more on car insurance. Now, here's your host, Andy Ockershausen.
This is Andy Ockershausen, and this is Our Town. And I have greatest news for you I hope you're regular listeners, because you're going to hear from a unique, wonderful, special individual and a very dear friend who happens to be a sitting judge, but she doesn't sit anymore because she's too busy now. But Joanne Alper is a legend in Northern Virginia legal cycle. What do you think of that?
You. Well, I never thought of myself as a legend.
But you are. Think about it, Joanne. You're a trailblazer. Maybe it wasn't meant to be that way, but isn't that not the way it's happened?
To some extent, yes. As a woman lawyer starting out in the mid-'70s, it was like being a trailblazer. There were very few of us. You could probably count on the fingers of 1.5 hands how many women there were. The only other female I ever knew in the law was Betty Thompson. Yes.
Who was a very dear friend of yours,
yes.
I know.
Yes.
But you have a wonderful story about how you got started, and we want to hear that. But before that, I didn't know you were born in Manhattan.
Born in Brooklyn, actually.
Oh, yeah. You were? Well, that's part of New York City,
yes.
Of course. A lot of people don't realize. I think it's another world. But Joanne, and your dad and mom are New Yorkers?
That's right.
And you're a native New Yorker? That's a great song, incidentally.
I grew up in New York. I was a native New Yorker, but I've obviously lived a whole lot more of my life in Virginia than I ever lived in New York.
Well, we consider that. Virginia is our town. You understand that, yes. Though. Even it's Arlington or Vienna, it's our town.
Mm-hmm.
And Joanne... And you lived out in Long Island with your parents.
That's right.
Right. Well, your dad was in WW2, correct?
Yes, he was a veteran of World War II.
So he probably got the GI Bill.
That's right.
And when you think about it, you're too young. Janice is military, she's too young. I lived through what the GI Bill meant to America. It was incredible.
It was. My dad
jump-started our country.
My dad, grew up. His parents were immigrants from Russia, came over in 1912 or 13. He was born here. Some of his older siblings were born in Russia. But he, by getting the GI Bill and having the money, he could have gone to college, but he had met my mother and wanted to get married. So he took the benefits he had after a few years of living, when I was about 3 years old. They bought a house out on Long Island in a new development that everyone in the neighborhood were, GIs who were doing the same thing. So we were all, all about the same age, all baby boomers, sort of growing up together.
Even, correct? I mean, the whole neighborhoods and the environment was even.
Exactly. It was amazing. In fact, as I said, we just had our 50th high school reunion 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
and just to see some of these people that I've known since kindergarten, and it was an amazing...
Because everybody stayed, right? Right through their generations.
People stayed. Very few people moved away. Obviously, since we've become adults, we've all gone our separate ways. We had somebody come from as far as San Francisco, Nicaragua,
Did you go
whatever.
back for that 50th?
I did. It was
incredible.
amazing. It really was. But it was a wonderful community to grow up in. It was the 50s, and it wasn't Lever to Beaver idyllic, but when you look back at it now, and you look back at it, and you look back at the what we did and how much fun we had and how little concern we had. I mean, the biggest concern was, in the 50s, we were worried about an atom bomb, so we had drills where we would duck under our desks because that would protect us from an atomic bomb.
Now they're teaching them to go under the desk with shooters. The live shooter.
I know. We didn't have to worry about that.
Everybody goes under the desk. So, Joanne, that was your Valley Stream, was your beginning in life, really.
Right.
That was a big part of what you are today, Valley Stream.
That's
and
correct.
The things out on Long Island with your parents. And then you had the idea the legal bug, while you were still in school?
I decided I wanted to be a lawyer when I was in junior high. It was a redirection by my mother because I really wanted to be an actress.
Your Jewish mother, naturally.
Yeah. I wanted to be an actress, and she didn't necessarily think I'd be able to make a living doing that. So she said, why don't you be a lawyer and do your acting in front of juries? And I guess I took the advice. And so I went to college knowing that I eventually wanted to go to law school.
Well, your ability to act is a very important part of your success, correct? You're up on that bench. Before that, you're a lawyer. You're arguing back and forth, right, or whatever it is. But being part of it, you have to be an actor to be a good attorney, I'm told.
To be a trial lawyer, you absolutely have to. You have to be able to know how to perform, whether you're performing in front of a jury or when you're arguing in front of a judge. You have to have a little bit of that, flair.
So you go to leave Valley Stream and migrate to Syracuse,
right?
Along with many famous people, a great school. A great alumni, of course.
Yes.
And you worked yourself up to be on the board there, correct?
Yeah, I have been on the board of trustees at Syracuse. I love it. Not only did I go there, my brother went there, my son, my daughter, my son-in-law. My husband says everybody except he and the dog went to Syracuse, and he spent enough money for tuition that he considers himself an alum as well.
But Joanne, that started you in the law by going to Syracuse.
Yes.
You were rubbing elbows with people in the same probably financial area, right? The Syracuse students. It's not a rich school. It's not a Dartmouth. Or,
no, it's not an Ivy League school. It's a private school though, and I got a great background. I was an American Studies major, which is not that popular nowadays, but was then. And it was a combination of American history, political science, literature. It was a wonderful major for someone who wanted to go to law school.
That helps you now as a judge, and it helped you all these years. Joanne, I've had maybe in my illustrious career 100 young people talk to me from time to time, how do I get in the broadcast business? And should I study that in college? And I said, no. Whatever you do, don't study broadcasting, because it ain't what you hear in college. Take history, learn geography, learn where you are, learn what the world is like, learn what America was, and then go for something, be in broadcasting, but don't waste your time. Study America. What's
interesting is that, the Newhouse School of Public Communication, which is probably one of the best communication school, whether it's print or news, sports, whatever. Right. But what they do at Newhouse, is that they don't let their students only take classes in Newhouse. You can only take a limited number of credits in the Newhouse area. You've got to be take your core English and history and political science and philosophy and writing. Exactly.
The kids don't write anymore,
Well, I remember my son was in Newhouse and he started at Syracuse in 95.
How old? He's 30 now, is he?
He's 40.
No way.
But yeah, he is. But they used to give them a test as Newhouse students at the end of the first year called GPS, which was grammar, punctuation, and spelling. I don't know that they do that anymore, but
they don't.
I don't think that. I don't know.
You demand that. You're on the board. The kids should learn that.
We can't micromanage the academic.
I'm sorry. You're good. You've micromanaged Northern Virginia for years. Well, this is our town, and I'm talking to Joanne Alper. And Joanne, we're going to come back and talk to you. Once you get that sheepskin or whatever it is, become an attorney, whatever happened to you. This is our town.
The natural habitat of a creepy doll is a horror movie. It can't help being creepy. It's that small, fixed smile and those never-closing eyes, always watching you, plotting, which you're imagining. It's mindless. But when the creepy doll hears that Geico not only saves people money, but also gives them easy access to emergency roadside service through an award-winning app, it knows you should switch. Because yes, switching to Geico is a no-brainer. The only question is, how did the creepy doll move from the bedroom to the hallway? I would get out of the house.
This is Sonny Jurgensen. Got a confession to make. I let my wife drag me to one of those Mike Collins estate planning seminars. Like I don't have enough on my plate with a certain football team. Actually, it wasn't too bad. In fact, we both learned a whole lot about how to protect our kids and grandkids down the road and to take care of ourselves right now. So if you get one of Mike's invitations in the mail, go. I'm glad I did. Get all the information and register online at MikeCollins.com. That's MikeCollins.com.
You're listening to Our Town with Andy Ockershausen. Brought to you by Best Bark Communications.
So this is Our Town, and Andy Ockershausen, and we're having a wonderful conversation with Joanne Alper. And Alper is not your maiden name.
No,
what
it is not.
Your maiden name?
My maiden name is Fogel.
Folger?
Fogel, F-O-G-E-L.
Oh, Fogel. We had a Fogel's department store here in Washington, as I recall. Very popular.
Well before me.
No, that's true. Joanne, so you're in Syracuse. You graduate with a law degree.
No, I graduated with my undergraduate degree was from Syracuse. My law degree I came down here for.
Oh, that's right. I beg your pardon. Yeah. You left the Syracuse, but you were intended to. So you came into that wonderful local institution called George Washington University, where I grew up. Where whether you went or not, it was not important because it was not expensive. It was easy to get in.
Well, not for it was back then. I don't know. My husband remembers because we were both at law school at GW together. He remembers paying $3,000 a year for law school back in 1972, 73. That was a lot of money, I guess, if you
it was a lot of money.
did it to today's dollars.
But a very, very difficult school, always with the great graduates at George Washington.
Yeah, it always was.
Because nobody in my area, it was always GW. We never called it George Washington. So, but you finished law school and got your degree.
Yes.
Who did you have any famous people? Being in Washington, they always flocked to graduations, like law school.
I remember who our law school graduation speaker was Dan Rather. Remember, I was in law school during Watergate, which was a fascinating time to be in law school
I'm
at
sure
GW. I mean, I started in fall of 72 and graduated in May of 75. So that was all during the Watergate hearings and everything.
Kent State, the Vietnam.
Well, that was before. That was when I was an undergraduate.
But Vietnam was still going on.
Yeah, Vietnam was still going on. Kent State and all the student strikes.
The country was always like this, and we were part of it.
That's right, but it was a fun time to be at GW. But GW was very different than it is now because the streets were all torn up because they were building the metro, they were building the World Bank building across the street. So it was an interesting place.
Well, my friend Oliver Carr was head of the Board of Regents when they were doing most of that building, and a lot of famous people helped GW get on their feet. What was the name? Tompkins, the big builder out of Philadelphia, did most of the building, I was told. Anyway, Joanne, I'm off the side. You're more important than the builder. Now you got to get a job. You got to get paid. You must have been waitressing or something to get your way through school.
No. I got married.
He didn't have any money.
Well, he had enough. He had enough for us to pay the rent on an apartment. I actually met my husband. He was a third-year student when I was a first-year student at GW, and we met in November. Got engaged in February, married in August.
Whirlwind.
And 45 years later, we're still together. My mother kept saying, "It'll never last." So, and and my husband.
Mom's still alive?
No, she passed away.
She would have said, "I told you."
Yeah,
it's going to break up any day.
But
now.
because I wanted to not transfer law schools. He'd been looking for jobs mainly in New York originally. He stayed down here. We stayed here, and that's how I kind of got my entry into Northern Virginia law by getting a job as a law clerk, working 20 hours a week for a firm in Arlington, which eventually they asked me to stay on as an associate. I later became a partner, and I stayed in that one place until I went on the bench in 1991. So
but it was a wonderful life.
It was a wonderful life, and that I always say that the lawyer who hired me, Harvey Cohen, in December of 1973, gave me my start. I would not be anything, my career would not have been anything like it was without Harvey giving me that opportunity for many reasons, not only because I was a woman in an era where there weren't many women in Northern Virginia getting jobs, and secondly, because he promoted me. He would take me everywhere to court and everything else. So when I actually graduated from law school in 1975 and passed the bar, people had seen me for a couple of years, so they said they figured I was a lawyer all along. So the first year I was in practice, there was a vacancy in the Arlington Bar Association in the position of secretary, and I got elected. Nobody realized I was, 6 months into, 6 months into my career. But he mentored me. He gave me such opportunities, and I'm always grateful. And I tell him that on a regular basis.
And no need to tell him because he knows it. So, but obviously, all these experiences you had. Growing up in New York and going to school and being associated with people, lifetime experiences help you in your main occupation, correct?
Yeah.
Being a judge is a people thing, I think.
You have to, I believe, that you can't become a judge at 25 or 30. I mean, you could legally, but the problem is I think you need some life experience of your own. I think you need to have represented clients to know what people go through, to understand that those aren't just two stick figures standing in front of you in whatever courtroom, whether it's a criminal case or a civil case, but they're real people with real lives and real backgrounds. And so I think that you're right, that life history, that life experience, the ups and the downs that you've had in life.
It's a people business, really.
It is. It really is. It is for being a lawyer, and I think it is for being a judge.
Oh, I would assume so more than ever, because your experience as a lawyer helped you as a judge. So here you are working for one of the prestigious firms in Northern Virginia and having a wonderful practice, obviously, and the comradeship of Harvey and Gerald And who was the
Brian Gettings came on
Brian
after that,
Gettings.
and David Shear and Frank Dunham, and yeah, we had a wonderful firm. We had great camaraderie over the
Oh,
years.
was
Bill
it wonderful?
Stauffer. We had great
You had a
people.
beautiful building in Arlington too.
Well, we had our little office first at 1400 North Yule Street, and then we moved over to 2200 Wilson.
On the
I used
top.
to say on the top, the top floor, and I remember the disagreement between Harvey and Brian as to who was going to get the side with the view of the Capitol. That was a big issue on moving to
no
a new.
question. Office spaces, it dictates who the boss is. We
That's
know
well.
that.
Nowadays they don't do it. A lot of law firms don't say a partner gets this size office and a associate gets a smaller office. Now everybody has cubicles, but back in the day it was a little different. But we had a great practice. We tried cases all over Northern Virginia, state court, federal court, D.C., both Superior Court and
You
federal
had a
court.
great
We had a
stable
great
of lawyers,
practice.
I call them.
We did. We had some great.
This is
people.
our town. This is Andy Ockershausen. I'm talking to Judge Joanne Alper. I never call her a judge. I call her Joanne. But we'll be right back, and we're going to talk about her career as a judge, which was different than her career as a defense prosecutor.
No, I was never a prosecutor.
Well, she prosecuted Harvey, and should have.
That I
This is
did.
Andy Ockershausen.
Hi, I'm Charles Mann. For athletes like me, playing every down in a pro game is like getting in a car accident. After years of playing football in Washington, my body is broken. I've had countless surgeries and joint replacements. I've been looking for a non-surgical treatment since I ended my career. I heard a radio ad for a seminar about alternative treatment. It's called regenerative medicine, which stimulates your own body to heal and repair itself. No surgery, no more pain. That got my attention. I went to a seminar to learn firsthand all about it. Now you too can benefit and receive this treatment. This is the same procedure that pro athletes use to quickly and effectively recover from injury. If you're looking to eliminate your pain and arthritis, or if you thought surgery was your only option, take the first step like I did. Call 410-787-7250. Register for the next seminar and learn more about this breakthrough procedure. Seating is limited. Register now by calling 410-787-7250 and start living life again.
Hi, Tony Sybil here to tell you about Tony and Joe's and Nick's Riverside Grill at Washington Harbor in Georgetown. Spectacular new restaurants. We've spent a lot of time rebuilding. You'll love it. It's really fantastic. For any information, you can go online to tonyandjoes.com. It'll be a wonderful experience for the whole family. Call 202-944-4545 to make reservations. Everything is fabulous. You've got to come down and have some wonderful food.
You're listening to Our Town with Andy Ockershausen.
This is Andy Ockershausen, and talking with Joanne Alper about our town, and she's seen it by living here. She is a big part of our town, but more than that, a trailblazing female in Northern Virginia in the tough years. To be an attorney in front of all these lawyers and all these judges were all men, of course.
Back when I started, there were all the judges and all the courts were men, were white men. There was no diversity on the bench, and some of them were somewhat hostile to a woman lawyer.
Oh, certainly.
So there were some challenges, and there were lawyers who were hostile. I'd pick up the phone and try to talk to a lawyer in 1976, and I'll never forget it. I called this guy about a discovery dispute in a case, and he said to me, "I'm not talking to some broad. Put your boss on." That's literally what he told me in 1976.
Oh, my. Did you say, I bet I hope never get you in court?
Well, yeah, that was long before I ever thought about being a judge. So,
But Joanne, but still, you went through the fire, and it must have made you a better person because you learned a lot and did a lot. But to get appointed to the bench is a major accomplishment almost for any attorney. Is that correct?
it is. In Virginia, what happens is, and what happened with me was that there was a vacancy in 1990 on the Arlington Juvenile Domestic Relations District Court. And the judge there, Judge Andy Ferrari, had decided he was going to retire after 20-some years on the bench. And so I, along with a whole host of other lawyers, declared that we were candidates, and the process was basically, number one, we had to get the endorsement of the local bar association. So the Arlington Bar had interviews, and they wrote up reports, and then there was a bar vote whether you were highly qualified, not qualified, etc. And then after that, the members of the General Assembly that represent Arlington, so the senators and the delegates, interviewed each of the candidates on one day, and it was in early January of 1991, and then they made the decision who the candidate that they would support, and then the rest of the General Assembly, adopted that. That's the way it was then, and it's very similar to that.
There was
now.
only one opening at the time?
There was one opening on the Juvenile Domestic Relations Court.
But that's amazing. So you had a lot of qualified candidates.
11 people that ran. I remember that race. There were 11 people that ran.
Well, that's all. They all had to be qualified to get that far, correct?
Yes.
So one of the things that I remember about you was when it became Juvenile Domestic Relations, as in some of my conversation, that was a very difficult job because of the people you were dealing with were in trouble and deeply in trouble.
It was because we not only had concurrent jurisdiction with circuit court to hear custody and support and other things in people who had been married, but we had the original jurisdiction on custody issues of people who had never been married but had a child or children. We dealt with domestic violence. We dealt with crimes by juveniles. Any crime that a juvenile committed either was tried in the juvenile court, or if it was a felony, the juvenile court did the preliminary hearing and then certified it to the circuit court. So, and a lot of people came in there and they didn't have lawyers and didn't have money for lawyers. So, dealing with families in crisis can be very challenging, and there's never enough resources.
Well, and tough for you. I know that you would feel that personally. I mean, deeply. It wasn't just a job. You were really dedicated to do something.
You can't look at that kind of a judgeship as just a job. And of course, I have 2 children, and my children, when I went on the juvenile court bench in 1991, my son was 13, my daughter was 9. So, I'm looking at kids, some of whom had grown up with my kids, some of whom went to school with my kids, and it was hard. It was hard just to see them. Even if you had no connection, you had an emotional connection because you saw the parents and what they were struggling through.
And there was a lot of money involved in some of these disputes, correct?
Not so much in juvenile court, really. Once you get to circuit court, if you're trying a divorce case and you're dealing with money and property, often you'd have a family dispute who were fighting over a lot of money.
Right.
But not so much in juvenile court.
No, I can't believe it. I misspoke that. I thought when you moved up, it became you were dealing more with adults.
Oh, yeah, all with adults. When I went to circuit court, I was elected to circuit court in 1998, and that's the same process to run for, to be interviewed, to have the bar vote. And I was the first woman to serve in the circuit court in Arlington County.
I told you were a trailblazer. I've told everybody
I'm very
that.
proud of that, and it was a great court. I had great colleagues. But the circuit court, is the highest court of trial jurisdiction, so we did everything on the criminal side, from capital murder and all the criminal cases. On the civil side, we did all the, trials of whether it was a personal injury case, a contract case, a divorce case, a wills and estate case, you name it, we tried it.
Well, how did you feel sitting there in front of attorneys that you had worked with or even knew on a personal basis? I mean, how did you handle that? Did you ever have to recuse yourself?
Yeah, I recused
like
myself.
Harvey.
Yeah, I for most of the time I was on the bench, I would not hear cases with Harvey or some of the people I'd practiced law with. Toward the end, when I had been away for such a long time, I wouldn't automatically recuse, but I would go on the bench, and if he were in a case or one of my other law partners had been, I would advise, and I would ask the other side, do you want me to recuse myself?
Right.
Because if you do, that's fine. I'd give them the option. But the funny thing is, when you do that, I remember the first time that one of a lawyer who was a good friend of mine was in court in front of me. I mean, we had a lot of cases. We didn't socialize much, but we had cases against each other all the time as lawyers. And we had a really hotly contested case in Prince William the preceding March, and now I'm on the bench in July in juvenile court, and he walks in the courtroom, and it was hard to keep a straight face, put it that way. He kept calling me Your Honor, and I kept looking out the window so he wouldn't see me laughing.
But they changed. The people you left changed too, because you were going along enough so their lives changed.
Right.
Well, you knew each other, but you weren't as tight as you used to.
No,
be.
we didn't practice together. There were no financial
Didn't
ties.
party together?
No, not at all. And of course, what happened was, when you go on the bench initially, you know all the lawyers because you've seen them, you've worked with them. By the time I left the bench, I retired in 2012. there was a whole new crop of lawyers who had only known me as a judge, never knew me as
Correct.
Joanne the lawyer, Joanne the president of the bar association, or anything else. They were kids. You're right. And now in mediation, what I do now, which is to try to keep people out of court, I work with lawyers who, some of whom I never even knew as when I was on the bench, who didn't know me as a
younger
judge,
than your
but know
children.
me as a mediator. They are younger. I sometimes sit there in cases and I talking. I give them my background and I tell them I've been doing this in the Northern Virginia legal community for 45 years. And I look around and nobody around the table is even 45 years old. That makes you feel old.
Joanne Alper, as I said, you're a legend, and I keep telling everybody that. But of all your years, how could you ever talk in court with Betty Thompson? Another female, had high profile. I remember her. She was a great divorce attorney. She and Harvey used to tussle all the time.
Betty was a great role model. Betty became a lawyer in 1950. 1950, the year I was born. And
Vietnam,
you had
Korea.
You had to be admitted to the bar of the different courts back then. You had to go in front of the local judge, and then another lawyer would move your admission to the court. And the story is told, and I know it's true because I've talked to Betty and I've actually seen the order. She walked into Judge McCarthy, who was the judge in Arlington at the time, and he said, "Little lady, what are you doing here?" I'm a lawyer. I want to be admitted to the bar. And he goes, "Well, who's moving your admission?" He looks around the courtroom full of men, and nobody was going to. So Judge McCarthy goes, "All right, on her own motion, she's admitted." She made her own motion, and that order exists in the clerk's office in Arlington. And you know what? What was great about Betty is she forged ahead. And I mean, being a woman lawyer in the 50s,
trailblazer.
she always said, when people ask, "I'm not a woman lawyer, I'm a lawyer." And that was always, and even though I didn't work with her, we were friends, and that really is sort of what I tried to adopt when I became a lawyer, because she was just an amazing.
She stuck with it.
She was, and she practiced law until the day she passed away, and I think she was 87 or 88, and she's an inspiration. She really was. She was active in the bar.
Reputation was sterling and a lot of publicity.
Yep.
She was attractive, looked good in print, correct?
Yep, she was.
But she was good for you then. You had somebody that you could lean on when times got tough, and I'm sure they did.
If you needed it. And the thing is, she always said to me, she says, it's not good to be friends with a judge, because I wouldn't hear her cases because we were friends.
Right.
So she used to say, what's the good of being friends with you? You won't hear my cases. But
That's
she
what friends are for.
She was the first woman president of the Arlington Bar, of the Virginia Trial Lawyers.
But
she was involved
she's
in all
a
that.
trailblazer, but you followed in her footsteps. Look at the things you've accomplished, Joanne.
I did.
Now, you still see your old pals, of course, and there'll never be another firm like that.
No,
because they had some very prominent people, but don't you still take cases? They still get paid, which is what America's all about.
No, I don't. I sit as a retired judge, and when I have time and they need me, and they do, I get
you
paid.
Do mediation,
but I do mostly private mediation.
You want to keep them out of court,
right? Instead of being in court, we now work to keep people out of court. Mediation and some arbitration, but it's such a more humane process. Think of it this way. Just use a divorce case as an example. Instead of people getting up there in court and fighting about whatever and ruining whatever relationships they may have, and if they have kids, they're going to be part of each other's lives.
Correct.
It doesn't matter if the kids are 5 or 25. It affects them. Here they come into a conference room, they come into an office, they work with their counsel, they work with the mediator, and they get things resolved so they can walk out, shake hands. I've had people finish divorce cases and give each other hugs, go out to dinner together. They don't all work out that way.
I understand
but
that.
It's still more humane than throwing it all up in front of a judge who's a stranger. This way, these people make their own decisions. So I've become a huge fan of the process.
I would assume economically it's smart too.
Yes, you save a lot of money.
Well, one of the things I learned many, many years ago from my friendship with various judges, that they tell clients right off the bat, if we can keep this thing out of court, it means a good thing for both of us, because otherwise we're going to pay a lot of money.
That's correct. And it's any kind of case, whether it's a divorce case, a personal injury case, a contract case, an employment case. Everything deals with money, and you got to try to keep, and it's expensive. It's expensive to do. Lawyers' fees, expert witness fees. It adds up.
Well, David Shear and his firm at one time, because I helped them, we were doing things about drunk driving, and they were trying to convince people there's a lot more to get arrested than the driving. It's the financial burden is incredible if you're a drunk driver.
That's right. One of the things, taking that back to juveniles, in Virginia, juveniles under 18 cannot get their driver's license until they go to a ceremony presided over by a juvenile court judge, and that's true in every county in Virginia. And so what we did in Arlington is we worked with Mark Cummings, one of David's partners, and others, and we got a grant, and we created a film of basically it wasn't even drunk driving. It was kids who had been, at a party drinking and then got stopped. And we actually got Katie Couric. I got Katie Couric to come down when this is back in the mid-90s when she was on the Today Show, to come down and do the narration. She filmed it because she's a native Arlingtonian. And I don't know if they're still using it because it's old now, but you really want to tell these kids, even if you're caught in the park with an open can of beer, there's a thing in Virginia called abuse and lose, which means you lose your right to drive, even if you weren't driving the car when you did it. An alcohol or drug violation can do that. It's going to affect if you're applying for a job later and you've got a DWI on your record. You got an employer who's looking at one person who's equally qualified than you but doesn't have a DWI. That's going to affect you there. It affects someone. It stays forever.
We try to tell young people that. I'm working with Matt, and Glad, and Dad, and with David Shear. But you've done such a great job. I mean, I hate to keep saying that because you're so young, that you're a trailblazer, and that's great.
Well, I've been very lucky. I have been very lucky. You talk about
there's no
people
luck,
helping.
Man. Luck
there
speed.
is. I really think that you talk about. I was asked a very profound question when I was being interviewed by the General Assembly delegation for my first judgeship, for the juvenile court judgeship. And I remember Senator Ed Holland, who's a wonderful man who was chair of the delegation, then said to me, looking back at your entire career, and I remember then I was like 40 or 41, he said, what would you have done differently? And I'd never thought that. You don't think about that when you're in your 40s. And I thought back, nothing. Everything seems to have worked out. I'm happy with where I am, and that's not everyone can say that.
Oh, you're so right. I mean, I get up every day and say that to this beautiful woman who's everything in the world, and she's just spectacular as you are, and we always have that attitude. We even went up this morning, got up and went to church. Not for you. I did it for the Catholics. I'll go to synagogues too. But it's important. It's important in our life, and I know it's important in your life. Joanne Alper, this has been incredible. There's so many things I learned from you that I did not know. Maybe it doesn't make any difference, but I store things. I got a computer in here that keeps everything. I know about all your bad things too, but I won't go into that.
Thank you.
But I hope you will please listen to our town and the other people we've had. Nobody like you. There'll never be another Joanne. Joanne. There's only one Trailblazer. Betty Thompson did it as a lawyer. You're doing it as a judge.
Thank you so much.
And please give my best to your husband. And he did a great job working for the city, too.
Yeah, he did. That. He was a corp counsel.
We were supposed to have Carl Racine with us today. He's the DA in Washington.
Yeah.
But he had something came up that he had to cancel. But we're so happy we had you, and we let this thing drag more than we should, but it's been great. Joanne Alper, you're wonderful. This has been Andy Ockershausen, and this is Our Town.
You've been listening to Our Town Season 4, presented by Geico, our hometown favorite, with your host, Andy Ockershausen. New Our Town episodes are released each Tuesday and Thursday. Drop us a line with your comments or suggestions, see us on Facebook, or visit our website at OurTownDC.com. Our special thanks to Ken Hunter, our technical director, and WMAL Radio in Washington, D.C. And thanks to Geico. 15 minutes can save you 15% or more on car insurance.